The pursuit started in Kiara when officers from the Vehicle Crime Unit tried to stop the XR6 Turbo. They say he didn't and took off. Top speed during the pursuit was 160 kilometres an hour. The pursuit lasted about 10 minutes through several suburbs, including Midland, Guildford, Coongamaya and here in Bellevue, where it ended in a dramatic arrest. We spoke to a number of witnesses who say the driver refused to get out of the car. Police had to smash their way into the vehicle to arrest the man. As we go to air this afternoon, the driver is under police guard at hospital. It's understood he sustained injuries during the arrest. We'll have more on this story tonight at 6 o'clock.
There could be good.
This is 10 Eyewitness News with Norelda Jacobs.
Good evening and welcome. First, a high-speed pursuit through Perth's eastern suburbs has come to a dramatic end. Half a dozen vehicles were involved in the chase, which reached speeds of up to 160 kilometres an hour. But as Silvana Sikorsky reports, when it finally came to a stop, the driver refused to leave his car.
A witness captures the action on camera. Officers using batons to smash their way into the Ford Falcon before pepper spraying the occupant. Inside, a 31-year-old man refusing to come out after leading police on a high-speed chase from Kiara to Bellevue. The pursuit began just after 1 this afternoon when the man failed to stop for police. The driver allegedly reaching speeds of up to 160 kilometres an hour. It ended after his car tyres shredded. That's when officers from the Vehicle Crime Unit swooped. The man was arrested here at the scene and was taken to Royal Perth Hospital, where he remains under police guard. It's understood he told officers he suffers from a medical condition. Inside the vehicle, police uncovered an illegal firearm, sword, ammunition and cash. Charges have not yet been laid. Silvana Sikorsky, 10 Eyewitness News.
The search is still bike riders. The Lakelands attack has left the victims fearing for their safety, with police launching a public appeal to catch those responsible. Dom Halen reports.
It was a bold daylight robbery.
We believe it was an opportunist crime, and it's just unfortunate that these two guys were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
After riding through bushland on Sunday, the victims, aged 22 and 24, were ambushed by two men armed with a rifle, who ordered them to hand over their motorbikes, even forcing them to load them onto the back of a black Nissan Navara. The alleged offenders then opened fire before fleeing.
Very surprising that something like this, especially with a firearm of this nature, and especially with 4 shots being fired, it was very surprising.
Mandurah detectives today releasing an image of one of the men wanted for questioning.
He's described as being between 178 to 185 centimetres tall, of slim build and with a shaven head.
They've also called on 2 mountain bike riders who may have witnessed the attack to come forward.
Obviously, we need to speak to them, and it's quite important that these 2 people, these unidentified witnesses, do get in touch with either Crime Stoppers or Mandurah detectives.
Isolated and peacefully quiet, it was here at the end of Stock Road, Lakelands, where the 2 alleged culprits were lying in wait. The brazen attack leaving the victims too distraught and too traumatised to speak on camera.
They don't want to put forward names or addresses, and look, yeah, they're very shaken up.
It's also hoped materials dumped at the scene will help the public identify the suspects. Anyone with information is urged to contact police. Dom Halen, 10 Eyewitness News.
Sydney's pipe-smoking bus driver has been sentenced to 8 months in prison. Sean Murphy's drug-fuelled ride, which was captured by onboard video, ended when he blacked out and crashed into a house, almost killing a mother and daughter. Andrew Denny was in court.
This is the moment Sean Murphy almost wiped out a young family. Passed out at the wheel, high on ice, morphine and synthetic cannabis, he crashed his bus through Rebecca Black's home. For her, remembering that day is still hard.
It hurts to know that, someone so irresponsible can be behind the wheels of these, public transport, putting our lives at risk.
Today, the 57-year-old arrived at court knowing he'd go to jail.
Are you worried?
He'd pleaded guilty to reckless driving while under the influence of drugs. Onboard security cameras captured him lighting up a pipe 13 times before blacking out and running off the road. A magistrate today told him the manner of this driving was so reprehensible and so dangerous, a custodial sentence is inevitable, giving him 8 months jail, an 18-month driving ban and a $2,200 fine.
He's going to serve his time and upon release continue with his rehabilitation. The
rehabilitation of his victim's house is still happening 4 months after the crash. The living room is still a construction site. 9-year-old Letitia was sitting here when Murphy's bus crashed into her home. She still has nightmares.
Sleeps in my room, won't sleep in her room, constantly scared.
One of the biggest questions that still needs to be asked is of the bus companies themselves. Murphy worked for 2 separate transport groups in recent years, and despite today admitting to abusing drugs since 1991, he was still allowed behind the wheel.
And it was only luck his stupidity didn't get anyone killed. Andrew Denny, 10 Eyewitness News.
Our Defence Chief has revealed Australian Hornets pulled out of their first airstrike in Iraq over fear.
News.
Major crash officers blocked off kilometres of road in Nollamara this morning after a fatal collision. Witnesses desperately tried to save the young motorcyclist as his mate, riding alongside, watched on helplessly. Alicia Banner has the story.
Just moments after impact, bystanders rush to help the motorcyclist. Police arrive on the scene and join in the attempt to save his life. His friend who'd been riding next to him by his side, desperate for a response. But by the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. The man in his 20s had lost too much blood.
Unfortunately, the motorcyclist has collided with the position where he has. It's caused a fairly severe leg injury to him, which has contributed to his passing.
The crash happened just before 10 this morning. The 2 motorcyclists had been driving east along Morley Drive. An elderly woman in a white Camry was turning right onto Flinders. This was the result. A bus full of people stationary at the traffic lights witnessed the horrific events unfold.
And he just goes beyond and just hits the car, and then it just happened so quickly.
I'd seen him do about 6-7 cartwheels in the air, and I just screamed because I knew something devastating. It's just so horrible.
The man was thrown 20 metres. His shoe flew off in the opposite direction, landing 50 metres up the road. The driver, in her 70s, escaped uninjured.
She's with her daughter. She is obviously distressed, but she's going quite well at the moment.
Major crash investigators arrived at the scene shortly after and closed off the entire intersection for several hours in a bid to piece together what went wrong. There are no brake marks at the scene. Police are investigating whether speed was a factor. Alicia Banner, 10 Eyewitness News.
A 5-year-old boy is in a serious condition after a car rollover south of Perth this afternoon. It's believed his father was driving the 4-wheel drive when it crashed on Mandurah Road in Medora Bay just after midday. The boy was initially taken to Peel Health Campus before being transferred to Princess Margaret Hospital late this afternoon. His father suffered minor injuries. Major crash officers are investigating.
Police allege the driver of the ute didn't stop. 5 minutes later, this is where he ended up. Several kilometres away on Roe Highway in Thornley, the driver crashed into a pole and down an embankment near Nicholson Road. The 38-year-old driver of the ute was taken to hospital with minor injuries.
The 31-year-old cyclist lived in Canning Vale. He was about 16 kilometres from home, riding here along Cudale Road when he was knocked off his bike and killed.
Detectives spent the day working on 2 crime scenes, retracing the moments of the ute, gathering evidence.
And we cross live to Chantel Toohey at police headquarters. Chantel, has anyone been charged?
Well, not yet, Sam. Now, police took the driver of the ute to Armidale Hospital for treatment after he crashed into the pole, but I'm told that those injuries are not serious and he is physically okay. Now, the man has now been taken into custody and is currently being questioned by police, but so far, Sam, no charges have been laid.
OK, thanks, Chantel. A Perth grandmother has been attacked inside her home by an intruder armed with a knife. The alleged offender ran from the house when the brave woman fought back. He was hit by a number of cars on Reid Highway as he tried to flee. Amelia Broon reports.
Police can't say how many cars hit the man, just that it was more than one. It was 7 o'clock this morning. Police say the alleged intruder was fleeing after assaulting a woman inside her home a few streets away. That woman was 60-year-old grandmother Zumra Stoklasa.
She's still shaking, you know. She's very, probably stressful time, you know, to be in that position.
Zumra, a nurse, woke to the noise of her laundry windows smashing. When Zumra went to investigate, she was confronted by an intruder in her kitchen who was armed with a knife. She was involved in a physical struggle with the man who punched her in the face, then ran off. Zumra ran to her neighbour of more than 7 years for help.
There was just blood over the kitchen, things messed around and glass everywhere.
Bleeding heavily, the alleged intruder ran down Strawton Road, Arcanda Road, then onto Reid Highway where he was hit. Tonight, he's in a critical condition at Royal Perth Hospital. Zumra's much-loved companion Bella ran away, but managed to make her way to a friend's house almost 3 kilometres away.
It's just unbelievable, you know. Yeah. She walked all the way from that situation, yeah, and she found our house. Yeah.
Amelia Brune, 7 News.
In breaking news, 2 people in a kayak have been attacked by a shark. The scare happened an hour ago at Castle Rock between Dunsborough and Eagle Bay in the state's southwest. Police began organising rescue crews to help after the pair raised the alarm. They managed to get to shore safely. It's not known what type of shark it was, but there are reportedly bite marks in the kayak. Perth doctors say they were shocked when they diagnosed a 2-year-old girl with melanoma. It's extremely rare, but just a handful of cases in the world. Little Frankie Preble has had the skin cancer removed, but now faces a lifetime of scans. Kate Smithers reports.
Frankie Preble has never been sunburnt. So when her mum Michelle found a red spot on the 2-year-old's arm, it never occurred to her it could be skin cancer.
I was in complete shock, had to go home and I just couldn't believe it. And then, you start looking on Google and you're hearing all these horrible stories.
Frankie's case is extremely rare, 1 in 500 million. There's no family history. Doctors say there are a few cases overseas of babies being born with melanoma. Why it's happening to children so young is a mystery.
Not very many people have a lot of experience in treating melanoma in kids of this age. So it's all a little bit unknown.
It's important to remember that 80% of skin cancers are caused by the sun, so the message is of course to wear sunscreen, a hat and stay in the shade. Little Frankie underwent surgery to remove the skin cancer in April. She's been left with a scar and will need to have scans for the rest of her life.
There's always the unknown hanging over our heads a bit as well.
Kate Smithers, 7 News.
In a rare and candid interview, a Perth man has opened up about his struggle with drug addiction and how it nearly cost him his life. The 42-year-old has been clean for almost 2 years. He wants to share his story to warn others not to use drugs and to help those addicted kick the lethal habit.
You're a prisoner and you are punished, you are demoralised, you feel terrible. You waste away, you're in pain all the time, emotionally, physically, and then you get better and you're not.
42-year-old Heath was a drug addict for almost half his life. He started using cannabis at 19. Then things escalated.
This is how bad it was. I'd literally pick up from my dealer, I'd drive down the road, on the main road, and shoot up in my car with cars going past me because I couldn't wait the 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get home and do it.
By 26, Heath was cooking methamphetamine, making more than $2,000 a day. Money only fuelled his addiction.
Some nights I'd start off with some speed, I'd drop a couple of flippers, get some cocaine, and then 3 days later you're in Lithuania with your pants over your head and you've got no idea how you got there. Then you've got to go to work.
He'd spent a year in jail, but his drug use continued. At the depth of his addiction, Heath attempted suicide.
And spent 2 months in a psych ward. That was pretty low.
Finally realising he needed help, Heath admitted himself to rehab at the Palmerston Association.
You think you can handle it, but you know you're in trouble. And there comes a point when you go, I can't handle this.
Heath has been clean for 20 months and has a job as a fitness instructor. He wants other drug addicts to know things can turn around if you want them to.
It's a choice, and you do it to yourself. And yeah, things get easier, and life is good, really good.
Amelia Brune, 7 News.
Another day and another car ploughs into a Perth home. This time, the young driver behind the wheel of an allegedly stolen car narrowly missed a young girl asleep in bed. The White family from Beckenham say they've already complained about hoon drivers in their street and they want action before someone is killed. Jordan Cutts reports.
3-year-old Lily was all smiles today, but last night she was sleeping just a metre away from where a stolen car slammed into her bedroom.
Well, the cops had said had it been a little bit further over into her window that they would have got her immediately. There would have been no chance for her.
The 20-year-old driver lost control of an allegedly stolen car during a police chase in a nearby Beckenham street. This black BMW X5 ploughed into the Dulwich Street family home.
Once we realised that that was what had happened, my husband raced into my daughter's room to make sure that she was okay, and she was actually still asleep.
It's lucky Nat and Matt have insurance. The impact of the crash moved 3 of the outside walls. They'll all have to be rebuilt.
The insurance company is saying they're going to have to be rehoused. It's going to take weeks to fix, and it's just a nightmare.
The speed limit on this street is 50 kilometres an hour, but neighbours say it's become a raceway for hoon drivers, and they warned authorities it was only a matter of time until there was a serious crash.
We've petitioned previously to have something done about this street.
Today is the latest in a scourge of car versus house crashes in Perth. There's been more than 200 since May 2012. Late today, police charged a man over this latest incident. Jordan Cutts, 7 News.
A 5-year-old boy is still in intensive care more than 24 hours after a car crash near Mandurah. Police are pleading for witnesses to come forward. Kate Smithers reports.
The 5-year-old boy has been here at Princess Margaret Hospital in a critical condition since yesterday afternoon. He was seriously injured in a crash on Mandurah Road, Medora Bay, when the Nissan Patrol he was in collided with another car. His 32-year-old father was driving the Nissan Patrol. He wasn't hurt, neither was the driver of the second car. Police are investigating if the boy was wearing a seatbelt and want to hear from anyone who may have witnessed that crash. It was about 12:05 yesterday afternoon. There were also 2 fatal crashes yesterday, one in Nollamara where a 42-year-old Morley man was killed after his motorcycle collided with a car. That happened on the corner of Flinders Street and Morley Drive. And in Bedfordale, a 64-year-old woman had to be cut from her car after a crash involving a truck. She died from her injuries. Police want to hear from anyone who may have witnessed either of those 2 fatal crashes.
Police are cracking down on dangerous drivers in school zones after a record number of students have been hit by cars this year. The government admits the figures are alarming, despite spending millions of dollars on making our roads safer. Silvana Sikorsky reports.
School's back and so are the police. Shocking statistics reveal so far this year, a record 22 students going to and from school have been hit by cars.
That is stark in itself, but when you compare it to the overall total of 9 for the entire year last year, it is unacceptable.
Education Minister Peter Collier blames the alarming figures on driver inattention and complacency. The government has invested $36 million in flashing signals as well as increasing speeding fines in school zones. But despite the measures, some drivers still aren't taking notice. Today on Broome Avenue in Morley, cars were clocked travelling up to 70 kilometres an hour in a 40 zone.
I see that flashing sign, I know I'm entering a school zone, do the right thing, slow down, keep a lookout for the kids.
Our aim is not to collect revenue through the increased penalties.
we want people to slow down so that we ideally don't collect any fines.
Since January, 28,000 drivers have been caught speeding in school zones. A student at John Forrest Secondary College had a close call after being hit by a car on school property in August. Staff say both students and drivers have a responsibility for their safety.
Parents need to remind their children about road rules and motorists being observant about students.
The government says all WA schools will have flashing signals installed by 2017. Silvana Sikorsky, 10 Eyewitness News.
And it comes as the state is struggling in its fight to keep this year's road toll down. Late this afternoon, a man was killed after crashing his motorbike in Beckenham. And on the weekend, 5 people died in separate incidents, including a 27-year-old Baldivis man who crashed his Harley-Davidson into a ute last night in Cardup. It follows an incident on Saturday morning where cyclist Brent McSwain lost his life in a hit and run on Cudale Road, while another cyclist is in Royal Perth Hospital with head injuries after he was hit by a car in Osborne Park this morning. Premier Colin Barnett has spoken out against cyclist behaviour on Perth roads after a rider nearly collided with his government car. It comes after a horror week on our roads with a number of cyclists and motorcyclists killed or injured. Rebecca Munro with the story.
Flowers laid at the site of a fatal motorcycle crash in Nollamara. It happened on Friday and kicked off a horror run on WA roads. On Saturday, 31-year-old cyclist Brent McSwain was killed in a hit and run in Welshpool. On Sunday night, the rider of this Harley-Davidson was killed after he hit the back of a ute in Cardup. Another cyclist was seriously injured in Osborne Park yesterday before a motorcyclist was killed in Beckenham later in the afternoon. The Premier says he's concerned at the recent spike and particularly at driver behaviour on our roads.
Well, this morning, having watched a cyclist come down the middle of the road and miss the car I was in by a few inches, yeah, I am.
Drivers and riders of motorbikes just not riding sensibly.
The opposition doesn't agree, saying it's up to the government to take more responsibility, slamming proposed cuts to road maintenance funding.
The cuts the government is putting in place to our roads across Western Australia could have tragic consequences.
Only about 15% of all WA road users are motorcyclists, but already this year, more than 22% have contributed to our death toll. So far this year, 138 people have been killed on our roads. 31 of those were motorcyclists. The government is currently undergoing a review of all road safety agencies. Rebecca Munro, 10 Eyewitness News.
A 36-year-old Balcatta man has faced Perth Magistrates Court after an alleged police chase through the northern suburbs overnight. Officers say they tried to stop the driver on Walderton Avenue in Balga, but he took off, allegedly speeding through several nearby suburbs. Pol Air tracked the Audi to Lee Court in Marangaroo and directed officers on the ground. The driver was allegedly hiding in a nearby property. He's been charged with reckless driving, failing to stop and possessing a prohibited drug. Tony Abbott's